Hi, my name is Todd Wright. And I'm Senior Product Manager here at Progress. And welcome to the webinar today, Coffee Break. Instantly connect to any REST API with Autonomous REST Connector. And now to introduce our speaker for today, that's Dennis Bennett. Dennis is a principal sales engineer at Progress. Dennis has over 20 years of experience in working with companies to help solve their data connectivity challenges. In the past, he has worked as an application developer, DBA, and QA engineer. At Progress Software, he's a principal sales engineer, as mentioned, for the data connectivity and integrations products. We're going to be hearing a lot from Dennis today. I'll add in some color commentary where necessary. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Dennis for his presentation. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Todd. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to connect to different REST sources using the Autonomous REST Connector. Just as kind of a background, I'm part of Progress DataDirect. DataDirect is kind of a business unit within Progress where our focus is completely on data connectivity, whether it's relational databases, kind of the old school stuff, or big data today, SaaS applications, so hosted cloud applications. And we'll talk some about that, but mostly we're going to focus on applications that expose REST APIs and how you can use Progress Autonomous REST Connector to quickly and easily get access to those sources. As I mentioned, we've been doing this a long time, and we have a number of different data sources supported. And it's funny, as big as this list is, the list of all possible ones is just ridiculous. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody has like an infographic showing it, and it's like just thousands, I guess, at this point. It's just crazy. And so we found that for us to support our customers, we had to have a way to get access to all these new data sources and provide a way for customers to do that. And the Autonomous REST Connector is the solution for that, mainly because all these new sources, as they come out, most of them are going to expose a REST API. It's just a very common standard. And if we are able to give you access to the REST APIs, it goes a long way to making them useful and kind of eliminating data silos. If you remember, data's kind of being isolated in silos has been an issue, since people have been trying to access data from different applications. In this graphic here, we're looking at, starting at the bottom, you can see there are a number of tools that people want to use. Most of these are business intelligence tools where people want to get access to their data and be able to use it just to understand it and get business value from it. Problem is, these applications on the bottom, they have some support for REST, but it's very kind of second tier compared to their support for SQL access, just because that's kind of where these applications started, and it just, is a more straightforward way to get access to data. So what we find is people want to use the tools they've been using, and they want to be able to get at these new sources, whether it's, software as a service applications. And a big focus we have today, though, is a lot of large companies and sometimes some kind of medium-sized ones are really standardizing on REST to get access to their data. And, there's a lot of good reasons for it. But the problem is it makes it difficult for these tools here at the bottom. And so we're going to kind of focus on, why sometimes it's more difficult to get at some of these internal sources compared to like SaaS applications. In this case, we're looking at a diagram of the Autonomous REST Connector. So as the user uses it, it really just seems like another driver, whether it's ODBC or JDBC driver, but it can do a lot more than a standard driver just because REST as a standard, as I said, it's, a very, very popular standard, but it's a very wide open standard. So when people create REST APIs, whether it's, software vendors with SaaS applications or whether it's, internal company applications, everybody does it differently. They'll have different kinds of authentication. They'll have different ways of returning the data. And often, very complex. And even things like sometimes it's JSON, sometimes it's XML, sometimes it's comma separated values. So what we sought to do with the Autonomous REST Connector was to build kind of a universal connector for all of these, varied REST sources. And so to do it, we have to, first of all, understand what the REST sources look like. And we have a tool that's part of Autonomous REST Connector called the Autonomous REST Connector Composer. Sometimes I'll shorten it all, and I'll just say ARC, but that is the Autonomous REST Connector. So you're able to use the ARC Composer to sample, let's say these are internal endpoints that you want to use with a business intelligence tool like a Tableau, Power BI, something like that. You're able to use the ARC Composer just to sample your endpoints. And from that, it builds a tabular structure. It doesn't move data. The data stays, where it is behind the REST API, but you're able to access it via SQL. And typically from these tools, like I mentioned, the very popular business intelligence tools. To a lesser extent, we see people using it for ETL, extract, transform, and load tools, typically on the extract side, where the rest would be a source. But once that sampling is done using the composer, at this point, it creates a model file, an ARC model that can be then used as part of the connection. So it's just going to behave just like it was just another relational database. So it makes it very much standardizes something that is very, very unstandardized. REST as a whole, as I mentioned before, it's sort of the Wild West. And this is a way to allow standardized tools to get at it in an easy fashion. This is just a screenshot of the ARC Composer, and you can see I'm able to point it at an endpoint, and in this case, it's SpaceX, and you can see the data is showing in a relational format. You can also see that sometimes when the data comes back, the REST data is often, as I mentioned, very complex, and one form of complexity is you'll have a REST document, so typically a JSON document, with another document embedded within it, and often multiple layers deep. Another thing you'll see is embedded arrays. That's very, very common also. And so what Autonomous REST Connector will do through the composer in building the model is normalize that out into standardized kind of tables, tabular structure of rows and columns. It just makes it a lot easier to deal with it with the tools that the power users are used to using, the BI tools and so forth. So really it's just, using the composer, create the model, and then from there, it's just use it like any other data source. And so one thing we've done is we've actually pre-built a number of templates for different models. These are some of the more popular SaaS applications we see where we saw, a number of people who just wanted to get access to it. So this is just, it's a template and, probably will get you 80% of the way you need to get for the sampling process. You may have, custom endpoints that, we didn't have when we created the model or things like that. But it just kind of speeds you. It's a quick start. So there definitely are, 45-ish Autonomous REST Connector models out there. But really kind of what I want to focus on is not so much commercial SaaS applications as much as internal REST applications. In that case, you're kind of on your own. Nobody is going to build a driver for something that a number of REST endpoints where you built internally. And, they may be very, very important to your business, business critical. You want access to them. You want to be able to do data analytics. So you're kind of stuck. Often people will do things like extract and load a relational database to do reporting on it, but that's not ideal. It's more moving parts, and the data goes stale quickly. So again, ARC, Autonomous REST Connector, one of its focuses is to give you access to these proprietary sources where you're not going to get a commercial driver. Another thing we see with internal REST applications is often the authentication is beyond what you might expect to see in a commercial application, in that there may be multiple steps involved where you'll do some kind of perhaps an LDAP lookup. And from that, if that passes, you would then go into some kind of secure vault and pick up OAuth 2 credentials. Sometimes you see the next line, OAuth 2 plus plus. What I mean by that is it's OAuth 2, but they've added extra stuff to it, whether it's extra fields in a post body, whether it's additional headers. That's pretty common to see. And Autonomous REST Connector has something called custom authentication that enables you to support, not only normal OAuth 2, but also these kind of extra OAuth 2s that we see often in business applications. The other thing we'll see is sometimes, I said REST is a wide open standard, but there are certain kind of things you see as far as filtering. Typically, you'll see either filters in the URL as query parameters, or maybe you'll see them in a post body. Sometimes we see these internal applications that do both. And sometimes we see kind of different syntax for setting up these filters. And so the idea is that Autonomous REST Connector can handle even these non-standard things, including sometimes the status messages coming or the status codes coming back are maybe non-standard, but we can use Autonomous REST Connector to kind of deal with these differences. And you would ask, from Tableau or from Power BI or any kind of other BI tool, why can't I go directly against the rest? And the problem is, as I mentioned, the wide openness of the standard just makes it difficult for them to give you universal access. And as I said, some will give you some support, but it's typically, there's a lot less to it than you might expect to see with SQL access. Sometimes you'll see OData, which a benefit of that is it's a little bit more standardized, or maybe a lot more standardized than generic REST. But I don't really see when people are building applications and building REST interfaces, I don't normally see OData being used for that. And just as an example, like Tableau does have web data connectors for REST, but you're looking at extract only, which isn't great. So basically, rather than looking at live data, it's going to pull the data in and maybe, refresh it at certain intervals, but it's not the same as live data. And people typically want to see live data. And the other thing is these Taco files, these Tableau connectors, they're not super easy to use. And the idea of Autonomous REST Connector is to make it as easy as possible. And so, as I mentioned, the fact that we're able to give SQL access, that really does kind of put a universal standard or near universal. Pretty much every BI tool supports SQL through either ODBC or JDBC. And some of the more popular business intelligence tools, we do a little bit extra to make it behave even better. So in the case of Tableau, we can provide Tableau data source customization files. What they do is they tell Tableau exactly what the Autonomous REST Connector driver supports in the way of SQL. Without it, Tableau will do a number of discovery queries just to determine, what is supported, what's not supported. So that will definitely speed things up. And in the case of Power BI, if you're just doing generic ODBC connectivity, you're not going to get live data. You're going to get extracts. So with Autonomous REST Connector, we've actually built a direct query custom connector, which comes with the driver. And when you're dealing with Power BI, it just makes it where you're dealing with live data and not extracts, which again is people want. They want live data. They don't want stale data. And with large data sets, it's just beneficial in that way too. And this is just showing really quickly kind of an internal ERP application where built a Tableau report using the Autonomous REST Connector and just dropping it into Tableau as if it was just another ODBC or JDBC driver. And Tableau actually supports both. So really, that's kind of what I wanted to get across, why we did it. It's just to make it easier to use Autonomous REST Connector with the tools people have been using, the tools that power users use, and just to make it where data is not siloed for any reason. So anyway, that's kind of the reasonings that we built Autonomous REST Connector and what we're trying to do with it. And I don't know, Todd, I think it might be good to kind of break in for some questions now.
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect time. Dennis, before we do, let's throw our cameras on real quick, and then we'll get to the questions. All right, there you are, and there I am. All right, great. Let's see, our first question, we'll get right to it. I don't see Power BI listed as a list within the list of tools on that slide that you showed, Dennis. Is that because it's easier to connect to or more difficult? Or did we just forget to add it to the slide?
Yeah, that is, I don't think it's more difficult. I don't think it's easier. I think it's pretty much on par, at least compared to say like a Tableau or something like that. And it does have a fair amount of connectors built in, but we definitely do work with Power BI. And then I think you saw on one of the later slides that we actually provide a Power BI direct query custom connector. So that I would say that's one of that and Tableau are probably the two most popular tools we see, BI tools.
Okay, great, great. Several more questions, a lot on this webcast. Um, the autonomous REST connector that you have, how does it differ from traditional REST integration methods? I know you touched on that a little bit, but it looks like there's some further questions on that.
Yeah, well, developers really don't have problems getting to REST. It's not that difficult for them to code to consume the REST API, handle the authentication, handle the payload, JSON payload coming back and, map it. But the problem is every REST API is different. We kind of touched on that, and every effort is like a new integration effort. So it's not like one and done. So the Autonomous REST Connector, the idea was to make it sort of a more standardized kind of format where just to ease the integration effort. And the other thing, we talked about, or maybe we didn't, more tight coupling where if the API changes, like whether it's new fields, different endpoints, it would require a code change. And you definitely would have to do something with Autonomous REST Connector still, but it's not like getting into code and redeploying new code or anything like that. So yeah.
Yep, makes complete sense. And another question, we actually had a couple of questions on this. They were a little bit different, but the same theme. How does the connector from Progress DataDirect dynamically adapt to changes in REST API structures without requiring code updates? And you kind of just went at that, but maybe elaborate a little bit more. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, it definitely isn't automatic. We're not going to necessarily pick up that the API has changed. You would want to use the Arc Composer, which we talked about, to actually modify the Arc model. No code changes required, but you'd probably either sample a new endpoint that maybe didn't used to be there, or if perhaps there's like new fields coming back, you would want to resample to kind of pick up the new data from that. So it's definitely not automatic, but it is something that's easily done to kind of adapt to the changes.
Okay, great. About security, how do we ensure security and governance when working with dynamic REST APIs?
Yeah, so I mentioned that REST APIs, there's many different ways people authenticate. The thing that we do is we're not going to change that. We're going to leverage the authentication of the underlying REST API. If you looked at how Arc was working, we're not bypassing the authentication. We're not replacing it with our own. We are actually going to, when the SQL comes in and a user connects, we're going to take that authentication information and pass it along to the REST service. And that will be either basic user ID password authentication. It could be, we support multiple OAuth 2 grant flows, among them access token, authorization code, password grant, client credentials, PXE, JWT, stuff like that. We also see less commonly maybe, but sometimes people will use some kind of token in an HTTP header. And then beyond that, even custom auth. But regardless, we're not bypassing the authentication. We're going to leverage whatever the REST API was built with. And another thing to note is the authentication is actually separated from the Arc model that was created from the sampling. So Arc models could be shared by users, but they wouldn't be sharing any authentication credentials.
Okay. The question that we get on a lot of our webcasts is, how do I get started? I know we offer a trial within DataDirect. Can you elaborate a little bit beyond that?
No, that's exactly right. That's the best way. If you have questions about this, whether you need more details, you can kind of reach out to us. And if it looks like it is a fit for your particular use case, what you want to do, we do provide evaluation, autonomous REST connector trials, and these have full pre-sale support. So me or others from my team would definitely help you, talk to you, and just try to help you get off to the quickest start you can, and share any kind of things we've learned over time from working with other people as they're working with the Autonomous REST Connector.
Yeah, that's what I really like about DataDirect too, Dennis, is that we have dedicated systems engineers such as yourself and others that aren't part of any other product line at Progress. They're just devoted to DataDirect, so you get a lot of personalized service. It's really been something that our customers have raved about. We have another one about security. How does the connector handle logging of sensitive data, and what mechanisms are in place to enable or redact request response logs? You might have gotten into that a little bit, but looks like there's more
No.
clarification needed.
Yeah. So the logging, any kind of logging done is optional. Typically, I would recommend it as you are starting and first setting up Autonomous REST Connector against your REST API. It's very helpful to show you what's happening. In that log, you'd see things like the SQL command coming in, the REST request going out, the HTTP status code. You see things like the elapsed time from the request to the response, and you can also see the payload. And again, that's optional. Beyond that, though, sometimes it's helpful to understand authentication-wise what's going on, and we have some kind of optional parameters that you could use to get more info, but that would really be by default. All of these security information, whether it's bearer tokens or things like that, would be not included. And again, any kind of logging would be optional.
Okay. We have another one here. What's the best approach for using the Autonomous REST Connector in a multi-tenant SaaS environment where each tenant has a separate API schema?
So I might have to see
Tougher
more
one, yeah.
about that. Yeah. There are ways. So Autonomous REST Connector, if everybody had different endpoints where the data came back differently, you would definitely want to sample them separately. The other thing, we didn't mention hybrid data pipeline. It's a separate tool from DataDirect. So it's a server-based solution that is a multi-tenant. It's built for multi-tenancy, and Autonomous REST Connector is actually a part of that. So depending on the full requirements for that, it may be good to consider leveraging hybrid data pipeline and then Arc within it. But I would have to know more about it. But there definitely would be ways to look at kind of handling that.
Okay. This is a really good question. I've actually never seen this question, and it's really relevant to trying out DataDirect software. What type of access on our system would the trial need access to? The person is asking as they believe their executives may have security concerns with a trial format environment.
So first of all, we're not hosting anything. So none of your data is coming to us. We don't have any kind of phone home software. If you install a trial, it'll be, wherever the box you put it on, you have complete control of it. Nothing is coming back to us. We definitely do see organizations where they are locked down tighter. I would certainly recommend, let's say you're installing Arc on a Windows box, you would want to be administrator of that. The other thing we see sometimes is we use Install Anywhere, which has as the installer, and that has a Java requirement. So that would be something. But beyond that, there's nothing coming back to us. And if you had like specific questions, we certainly could, address them kind of offline.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Dennis, that wraps up the questions. We do have a few other questions that we're going to address after the webcast. We had several questions on this webcast that I really appreciate, and appreciate your answers, Dennis. To everyone on the line, if your question did not get answered, it will get answered individually by either Dennis or someone else within the DataDirect team. And of course, everyone that registered and attended today will receive the recording of this. And with that said, Dennis, I appreciate your time. Everyone that joined, I appreciate your questions and your time. And we look forward to speaking with you in the future. And this concludes the webcast. Thanks again, everybody.
Good. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Dennis.